All right, so picking up on section 6 here of chapter 1, Ishmael is now given his story of how he has come to be in that room, with how many pupils he's had, and this is where we're starting. There have been times that having too much to say can be as dumbfounding as having too little, and so, again, they're starting to have their conversation through their eyes telepathically. The narrator asks, how many pupils have you had? 4. And I failed with all of them. Why did you fail? I failed to underestimate the difficulty of what I was trying to teach, and because I didn't understand the minds of my pupils well enough. And so then the narrator, I think reasonably asks, well, what do you teach? And they go through a little bit of dialogue, and Ishmael finally says, the subject that I teach is captivity. Captivity, the narrator responds, that's correct. I'm trying to figure out what this has to do with saving the world. Okay. Ishmael thought for a moment, among the people of your culture, which want to destroy the world? Which one want to destroy it? As far as I know, no one specifically wants to destroy it. And yet you do destroy it, everyone. Each of you contribute daily to the destruction of the world. Yes, that's so. Why didn't you stop? I shrugged. Frankly, we don't know how. So Ishmael says, you're captives of a civilizational system that more or less compels you to go on destroying the world in order to live. Yes, that's the way it seems. So, you are captives, and you have made captive of the world itself. That's what's at stake, isn't it? Your captivity and the captivity of the world. Yes, that's so, but I've never thought of it that way. Okay. And so we're going to have this theme of captivity. And, when I think we kind of consider the notion of captivity, we think of it in terms of, being in a jail or being, again, captive by somebody who's controlling you. All worthwhile and all working within the framework of what I think Ishmael is going to get at. But I'm curious as to kind of what you all consider and what you all think about this nature of captivity. Because I would like to think that all of us, would very much claim to be free, that we would claim to, have freedom, we live the lives that we want, we're, pursuing our own ends, and ultimately, yeah, we're free. But is it the case that we very well might be captive? And if so, what are we captive to? Okay. All right. And so that's chapter 6. Blah, blah, blah. The world is not going to survive very much longer as humanity's captive. Does that need explanation? No, not to me. I think there are many among you who would be glad to release the world from captivity. I agree. What prevents them from doing this? I don't know. This is what prevents them. They are unable to find the bars of the cage. Okay. What do we do next? Ishmael smiled again. Since I have told you a story that explains how I came to be here, perhaps you'll do the same. What do you mean? Perhaps you'll give me a story that explains how you come to be here. I said, give me a moment. You can have a number of moments. So again, one of the aims here is to think about, okay, if we are captive, well, what is it that's holding us in? Where are those bars of that cage? What are the bars of that cage? Okay. All right, section 7. Section 7, chapter 1. Once when I was in philosophy class, I told him I wrote a paper for philosophy. I just paraphrase that. Sorry. Excuse me. I don't remember exactly what the assignment was. Something to do with epistemology, which you all now know what that is. It's the study of knowledge. How we know what we know, do we know anything at all? Here's what I said in the paper. Guess what? The Nazis didn't lose the war after all. They won it and flourished. They took over the world, wiped out every last Jew, every last Gypsy, Black, East Indian, American Indian. Then when they were finished with that, they wiped out the Russians, the Poles, the Bohemians, the Bavarians, the Bulgarians, the Serbians, the Croatians, the Slavs. Then they started in the Polynesians and the Koreans and the Chinese and the Japanese, all the peoples of Asia, blah, blah, blah. Naturally, the textbooks used in the schools no longer mentioned any race but Aryan, or any other language but German, or any religion but Hitlerism, or any political system but National Socialism. There would have been no point. After a few generations of that, no one could have put anything different into the textbooks, and even if they'd wanted to, because they didn't know anything different. But one day, 2 young students were conversing at the University of New Heidelberg in Tokyo. Both were handsome in the usual Aryan way, but one of them looked vaguely worried and unhappy. That was Kurt. He asked his friend, "What's wrong, Kurt? What are you always moping around like this?" "I'll tell you, Hans. There is something troubling me, and troubling me deeply." His friend asked, "Well, what is it?" "It's this," Kurt said. "I can't shake this crazy feeling that there's some small thing that we are being lied to about." His friend said this, "I can't shake this crazy feeling that there's some small thing that we're being lied to about." And that's how the paper ended. "And what did your teacher think of that?" Ishmael asks. "He wanted to know if I had the same crazy feeling as Kurt. When I said I did, he wanted to know what I had thought we were being lied to about. How could I know? I'm no better off than Kurt. Of course he didn't think I was being serious. He assumed it was some exercise in epistemology." "And do you still wonder if you've been lied to?" "Yes, but not as desperately than I did. Not as desperately. Why is that?" "Because I found out, as a practical matter, it doesn't make any difference. Whether we're being lied to or not, we still have to get up, go to work, pay the bills, and all the rest. Work till we're 60, move to Florida, and die." And so let's think about that for a second, right? Is it the case, could it be the case, that we are all captive to some civilizational system where we know no different, right? And you can think about this in a lot of different ways, right? Especially if you were raised in a particular way where you had standardized education, right? You were taught what was told to be taught. You read what you were told to read. You've listened to the stories that your parents, your grandparents, your cultural figures, your religious figures have told you to believe, to listen to, right? In the same way that Kurt and Hans, right, or the way that Kurt kind of comes and has this moment of doubt and says, "Wait a second, could it be the case that actually all of this is manufactured, fake?" Is it the case, potentially, that we also, in our society, in our civilization, in the lives that we're currently living, might be experiencing something similar? And if so, what does that mean? What does that look like? Have we been lied to? Does it make any difference? Because still, we're going to have to wake up, go to work, pay the bills, because that's the world that we find ourselves in. Right? And so that is where section 7 ends. Chapter 8 kind of sets up the groundwork for the beginning of the rest of their dialogue, or at least the starting of their dialogue. So as you will see in your Friday folder, you were tasked this weekend with responding similarly to the prompt of Kurt and Hans there, where I've asked you if you feel like you've been lied to. Whatever that means. Have you been lied to about the way the world works? Have you been lied to about kind of the expectations that the world has on you and for you? Have you been lied to potentially about the way things came to be this way? Okay. And if so, what does that mean? How important is that? That's one question. Second question, does it matter? That's a hard one. All right, we will pick up with chapter 2, and you all are required for the weekend. And it's a lot of reading, but hopefully as you start going, you'll kind of recognize that it's pretty easy to get through. But for the weekend, I have tasked you all with reading from chapter 2 through chapter 6. So chapter 2 through chapter 6, and so you'll kind of finish right where it looks at 7. Okay? All right. Thanks.